other misdemeanors category. That is 5-year ban, and that includes, but not limited to, contributing to the delinquency of a minor, providing alcohol to a minor, etc. So those are our proposed criteria for exclusion. Those are absolutely debatable, and we could change any of those if you so choose. But that's what we're going to match people up against when we run the background check. If they come in with an item in that area, criteria for exclusion, they're automatically banned from coaching from us, and that will be for 1 year. So if someone did something 10 years ago and was 9 years ago and was convicted of it, they could reapply next year knowing that it goes off after 10 years. One second. So one other thing we wanted to discuss was frequency. How often, if a coach passes the background check, and we have a lot of coaches that coaches for us in a repeated manner every year, until their children get through grade school, whatever it might be. One of the questions is, how often do you subject them to a background check? Nationally, 70% people of agencies out there do it annually, 30% do it every other year. It's strictly a council decision. We would recommend every 2 years, but once again, that's open for your debate. I mean, it's 100% legitimate. Someone could be out there coaching right now, commit a felony offense that goes against our criteria of exclusion, and we might not find it out 2 years from now. I mean, that's something you have to consider when making that decision. The other thing to consider is where do we stop with the background check process? And this is something that is a tough one, because if you just stop at the head coaches are like anybody else. They can't be there a lot. Sometimes they can't be there for practice. Sometimes they can't be for their game. When I coached my girls' team over in the summer, I had 5 assistant coaches out there, 5 of them. Could you take this on down to the assistant coaches? That's a wonderful question. We can look at our area municipalities and see what they do. Springfield. I'm going to compare Springfield and Branson because those are the 2 agencies that have the exact same league setups we have, and they have the exact same, they're going to use the exact same company that we're proposing to use, SSCI. Our leagues operate in a manner a little bit different than most, but the same as Springfield and Branson, in that there's 3 types of teams we have that come through our youth athletic system. There's a completely formed team that might come from another city. In our bigger sports, basketball and baseball, those teams make up about 50 or 60% of our teams in our league. Might be from Mount Vernon, Aurora, wherever. They come to us fully ready to go, have a coach, an assistant coach fully ready to go. Another type of team we have is a team that's almost formed, but they just need 2 or 3 more players. So they call us and they get the players off and placed on an individual list. And the third type of team we have is a team made up strictly of everybody off of an individual list. Tried and true, for every sport, we usually get about 150, 200 kids on the individual list that just want to play. I mean, they just want to play. The truth be had, we have a lot of problems getting volunteer coaches for that particular list. Chris Arnold, our athletic superintendent, goes right down the list and calls for coaches. Calls once, calls twice, calls 3 times. Sometimes, not often, but sometimes we have kids that aren't able to play because we can't get a coach. So those are the 3 type teams we have, which match up with Springfield, which matches up with Branson. Springfield, as an example, uses SSCI. For any team that picks 1 or more kids up off of the individual list, they run those head coaches only, through the process of SSCI. For any teams that come into them already preformed, totally good to go, and I'm not sure why they do this, but this is their in-house policy, they have a staff member dedicated to running those individuals, head coaches and assistant coaches to the head coaches that are coming in all with already preformed teams. They run those through, but have staff members run those through strictly against the Missouri sex offender list and Missouri CaseNet. Now, what does that do? That gives you the results for the state of Missouri. I mean, it doesn't give you a national result. That's their policy, that's what they do, but that's kind of a point of comparison of what they do compared to what we might potentially do. The city of Branson, who uses SSCI, chooses to volunteer background check every single one of their head coaches, regardless of what type of team it is. But they stop at the head coach level. They don't go down to the assistant coach level. So the three major things and decisions we need to look at here tonight are the criteria for exclusion. Do you believe that to be fair, just, and right? The frequency of the background checks. How often should we issue the background checks on coaches? And the third one, which I just lost my train of thought, was how far do we go down from coaches to assistant coaches and on? Just to run some numbers, and money has nothing to do with this. We got to do what's right, obviously. But we have 405 teams that come through our youth athletic programs last year. I would say roughly 45 of those have repeat coaches, like if they coach baseball or if they've coached soccer or basketball or whatever it is. If you do that math, if you do it on just head coaches only, it works out to about $6,600. If you extend that down to assistant coaches, just using the multiplier of 2.5, because sometimes in basketball you only have one, sometimes you have none, sometimes in baseball you have 2 or 3, sometimes in soccer you have 2 or 3. But if you extended that down to 2.5 coaches per team, that would be the head coach and 1.5 assistants. Based on the 360 teams, 45 being returnees, that math works out to about $16,650 annually. We've allocated funds in this budget to start the process. I don't know if you remember that last budget time year we talked about that. Lagging a little bit behind, but we're prepared to begin the process in our boys basketball registration, which starts end of October. So that's a summary. I hope that wasn't too much information, but the three main things we need to decide upon tonight were given to you a minute ago. So. And any general questions about the whole process? So.
Point of clarification too. So you're basically recommending every 2 years you're recommending head coach,
head coach and the co-coach, and then just for clarification on co-coach. A lot of times when we call for coaches on that volunteer list, the only thing they're willing to do is co-coach it with someone else because they don't have a lot of knowledge of the sport or they don't want the whole responsibility. So in that case, we don't want to pin one down over the other. That's the definition of a co-coach, right?
And that basically sums up everything else that's listed in there. So you need direction on, you've got it listed in here, you need direction on whether we go forward with what you recommend or we make changes to what you recommend.
Correct. Those recommendations are in the policy, but those three main areas are what we need a firm decision on before we go forward.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. You put a lot of effort into this. You and I talked, and Jim and I talked here just a couple weeks ago, I think, and this is a lot of information in a short amount of time, so thank you. With that, questions, comments, discussion from council?
I just have one question.
Mr. Wilson.
Why age 18? Why not young?
That's typically it is what we do in employee background screenings as well. Someone maybe smarter than me may have to give the answer to that, but even in our employment here, we only go down to 18 running background checks. So.
Get into closed records if you get below
Minors.
18, minors.
I wondered if that was what it was.
They will be sealed.
Because they do commit crimes and under that age.
Yes, they do.
But that was my question.
Mr. Clickenberry?
I'll start with the offense area. You have 2 offenses on alcohol in 5 years. Only, 1 in drug. Why did you specify 2? I mean, for me, if someone has a DWI or DUI, I would propose that be 1 offense over 5 years and not 2. But
once again, this is just for recommendation. The national thing is 2 or more on both alcohol and drug. We took the drug out of it, left the alcohol at 2, but that is open to council debate. So I will say, and you never really know what all goes on out there, but the driving record of our coaches should be pretty much just left alone, I would think, because we don't have a lot of hauling back and forth. But the specific alcohol offense is definitely open to debate. So.
I know. I mean, I can see it being 2 nationally in a lot of areas. It's fairly liberal, and and sometimes you can get several DWIs before they even do anything serious to an individual, but we're talking coaching a kids team. And that's a pretty big lapse of judgment if you ask me, so.
These are so.
I don't know what other people would think, but that'd be the only one that I really saw on there that I would change.
These are such tough questions to answer. They are, because how long is too long on anything, really?
Yep.
But, I mean, we went with the national standard other than we pulled the drug out. That's what we did.
Anybody else have feelings on the alcohol?
You can, I mean, one of the other options in that category, if you felt 2 was acceptable, but you wanted to change the years, you can make 2 in a 7-year period, so that way, you know, you can make it a little more restrictive by changing the years, or you can go with 1 and change, you can go 1 and make it in 3 years too, and make it a little less restrictive with 1. So there are more options than just changing 2 to 1. You can change the number of years as well. These are all things that we talked about, and again, as you have said, everybody here will have a different opinion, I'm sure. So we pretty much stuck with what had been used in other organizations and what seems to be an accepted method.
Mr. Brashears?
I think it's very obvious that Jared has spent a tremendous amount of time on this. I mean, it's unbelievable, I'm sure, how much time you have spent. And since this is the very beginning or first go-around, so to speak, for this, I'd like to make a motion to accept his proposal as presented.
I'll second that.
They're technically calling for the question, which ends debate, if there's a vote to accept what they just did.
Okay, I'll call the
There's
question
still-
then.
Well, there's
There we go.
other areas of the question
They
for debate.
called the question.
Yeah.
Unless it fails, it goes to a vote.
Fine.
So I've got a motion for the question and a second.
Yes.
Charlie Geary. Charlie Geary.
Councilman Clinkenberry is correct, it'd be
There were 2
accepting
other areas that he
it
asked about.
as recommended, which would accept what is written down right now without a decision on the other areas. Just so everybody's clear on what we're doing.
Okay. Let's go ahead and take a vote on the call for the question.
Yeah, vote on the call for the question.
Okay, I have a call for the question and a second. All in favor of that, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
No.
3 to 3.
I have a 3-3 tie. We'll try that one more time with a hand.
You probably, I've been waiting for this.
Was that interesting?
I don't want to go on all night, but I'd like to ask them about some of the other
Hold
areas.
on. I have a motion and a second. All in favor, raise their right hand of calling for the question. Yes. All opposed, call the question. Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much. You've been waiting for how long?
Yeah, it's been 7, 8 years.
7, 8 years. You've been waiting for this. Fantastic.
See you next annual.
Make him
Yeah.
take a position.
I'm gonna keep taking a position. I'm gonna let discussion continue, and I wanna make sure that we get everything vetted, no offense to you three, no offense to the three but discussion does need to continue. You have done a lot of work, and I appreciate we've had discussion on that, and I appreciate it, because there's a lot more that went into the background of this than you probably know. So we wanna make sure that we get the right policy in the right place at the right time. So, with that said, discussion continue, further discussion, Mr. Quinkenberry.
Another area was on whether you do head coaches or coaches. I know, just interacting with teams with my son here in the city, most people don't even list themselves as like assistant coaches. I mean, we just pulled parents whenever we needed a base coach, and every week it seemed to be different. I mean, it could be a mom, dad, or whoever was available, you grab them. So, do you actually have people that sign up and say they actually are a coach or assistant coach? I mean, the head coach you obviously do, but how do you handle it on the others, or is that why you can't do the others?
To your point, I mean, you can have as many assistants as humanly possible out there, and for certain ages, you have to have them. Under this policy, just as it was my responsibility when I signed it up over the summer, you would be responsible for everyone listing as an assistant coach that you believe is going to help you. That's the only way I know how to do it. Springfield makes you go to the back of the page if you think you're going to have more than 3. So that is a really tough question, because, yeah, did I have 2, speaking for myself, did I have 2 guys that helped me a lot, yeah, but I also had 4 that didn't help me as much as the others do. I mean, it's kind of the nature of the beast. Most of the time in basketball, it's a little more defined as far as who sets the bench, but helping out at practices is not necessarily defined. Baseball is a totally different gorilla. I mean, you need 4 or 5 just to get the lineup ready, get the base coaches out there. I mean, there's a lot of things involved in baseball, talking sports specific. But
Sure.
Let me ask you a question, Mr. Keeler, this hasn't been brought up. What is on our form currently to sign up? Do we have, for a particular team, let's say we're going to have a team from council members.
Right.
Do we have to sign up a head coach and an assistant coach?
you list assistants, right?
You have to list all assistants?
Well, I don't know how many
However many
lines we
you
have, we just say assistant, right?
Okay.
One.
But if you're one of those, you just gave them 12 people on a team and pulled the coach, until you show up and start asking for volunteers,
Right.
you have no idea who those other coaches will probably be
Very true.
when you're filling out that form ahead of time. I know we did.
Are you talking about off the individual list, is it, or?
Yeah, or even a team that's
Yeah.
got, like this year, we had 5 or 6 that were gonna keep playing together, but we pulled the other half of the team just off the list. But we had no idea who else we'd be able to pull in until you go to a couple practices and see who wants to, participate.
Which actually, I'm glad you said this, because it brought up 2 more issues that needs to be talked about. A lot of our teams begin practicing long before the registration period, long before. And that brings up a whole different dynamic of, I mean, they're not even subject to the background screen, and they're already practicing. So is that an issue? I mean, that it is. I mean, there's no way we have around that. And the teams that are participating in other leagues elsewhere, whether it be another municipality or at a private place like the courts or the field house or anything like that, they could be 100% allowed to play up there, and they come to our league and they not be allowed to play. But I shouldn't say allowed to play. That coach may not be allowed to coach.
I see why, was it, did you say Branson was the one that if they brought in an entire team, that they just had the city
Springfield.
officials look their background up?
Springfield, yeah.
Well, when you bring in a whole team, you figure if all those parents have decided to be together, they probably vet their own,
Yeah.
their own team, so I can see that to some degree. I still think we should do the head coaches on that one, and that's the way you have it set now, right? Is we do all of them, whether they bring in a team or not?
Correct, right.
Okay, yeah.
Ms. Poole?
Do you really think that just doing the head coaches would be sufficient? Because when you have assistant coaches, they could get in as much trouble with kids as the head coach. And would the head coach be responsible for somebody else that hasn't had a background check?
Once again, that's a wonderful question, and something I think we've been fighting internally for a month now. You could literally background every parent on the team, and that may not be enough.
That's right. And who are we gonna trust?
Exactly. Exactly. But it does.
Where are we gonna stop?
It does ultimately come down to a parent being there and never leaving, and then never leaving their child in the care of someone that they don't know or trust. That's what it comes down to. This whole policy can be circumvented like you wouldn't believe. But are we doing something? Are we preventing 1 or 2? We might be, and maybe that's the answer. So.
I understand where you're coming
Right.
from, but I still don't see
Well, I'm glad you brought up that
solving
point.
our problem.
I'm glad you brought up the point because it's totally valid. I mean, it is totally valid. On a national scale, it's totally valid. Because where do you stop?
Well, and in my mind, it does as much to inform the parents as it does to inform the league. I mean, to inform you that there's an issue. I don't think you can go levels because you have so many possibilities. You have to set with the head coach.
Mr. Wilson?
And it's something like this, you've got to start somewhere, then after you start, you can see where it needs to be tweaked one way or the other, and you can come back and tweak it to the good of it.
I would agree.
I think our biggest thing is education, is that this may be a little bit of deterrence, but it's in the parents' best interest to not use, if they see that we pass this, we don't want them utilizing it as a crutch, thinking that, we're solving all the problems. The parents' involvement in this day and age and, being with the team is probably the best option whenever possible.
Ms. Harrelson?
I know my kids, the older ones and now the younger ones, have been through this program for years. So, the head coach I think is good. As you get into the older kids, your 4th to 6th graders, that's when they do almost exclusively list one assistant. That's because the head coach can't always be there. Sometimes those coaches are coaching 3 or 4 teams.
Correct.
So you will have one assistant who is in charge for practices, for games sometimes when the head coach isn't there. I don't know if we get to that age level, if we want to. I mean, if they specifically list, because it's not just a volunteer helping out for that game. This is someone who has signed on the dotted line and said, I'm going to be the assistant coach. It may be something to think about to check those. I think ultimately it comes down to parents being responsible for their kids and who they let their kids be around too. But we do need to do something.
I agree.
I don't have an issue with the 2 years for the alcohol because somebody can make a stupid mistake one time, but I've never had a coach drive my kids anywhere, ever. I haven't ever seen one do it for anybody except their own kids. So, and that comes down to parenting too. If you think, I know a lot of the coaches we had were people we knew. Sometimes not, but you get to know them pretty quick, and you get to realize if you have a good intuition, you realize really quick if you like them or not. I mean, I think it's a good place to start. We need to do something. We need to, at least say we've done our part.
Right.
In the effort of organization, council, Mr. Keeling's asked for your opinions on frequency, yes or no. He's asked your opinions on frequency, how often, yes or no, on his biannual, or no, every 2 years?
Every year, every 2 years.
Every 2 years. And he's asked your opinion on depth, how far down to go, which means coach, assistant coach. So with that, I'm going to ask, let's focus in on offenses at this particular time. I'm not going to squash discussion. I just want to bring us to a point where Mr. Keeling's asked for 3 different areas. These are the 3 areas. Offenses, he asked for some discussion on that and direction. If you feel strongly about one way or the other, I request that you make a motion, and we'll go from there. But let the discussion begin on offenses. He's asked for what you see written. If you would like to change that or modify that, please state that. So, opinions on offenses.
I'm good with how it is.
Good start.
Fair enough. Is that consensus, council? Okay. Frequency. I think Mr. Keeling right now has every 2 years, correct, sir?
Correct.
Okay.
2 issues of frequency is if you're a repeating coach and you pass, it should be 1 year or 2 years before you're checked again, and the other issues, if you fail, and this one's an industry standard and probably not even open for discussion, but you got to wait 1 year, so those are the 2 issues.
Okay, there you go.
One question on that.
Mr. Wilson.
When you say every 2 years, that's for the ones, I don't know exactly how to bring that out. If you get a new coach in between the 2 years, you have run them a background check.
Yeah, this is strictly by individual. If you pass this year,
Right.
today, 9/14/15, your next one is 9/14/17.
No matter what you coach.
Yeah, well, but if a new coach comes in next year, you run him through the process, and his is in 18 then.
2 years from the pass
Right.
date, right,
Okay.
right, yeah. Mhm.
That's what
And we'll keep all those records in-house of what the date was of the pass or the fail. Right.
Good.
I'm good with it.
All right. Additional questions, comments on that? Council, everybody okay with that? Fair enough. Fair enough. Depth. How far down? Coach, assistant coach, 3 assistant coaches? Mr. Keeling, you're recommending the coach and co-coaches, correct?
At this time, yes.
At this time, okay. That's not assistant coaches, that's coach and co-coach.
That's correct, right.
Okay, that's what Mr. Keeling's recommending. Council, discussion on that particular item.
That's a good start.
discussion on that particular item?
Discussions on the topic as a whole,
Yeah.
not on that focused
I'm
area,
gonna
no.
get back to that in just a
That's
second.
fine.
Okay. Everybody okay with that? Coaches and co-coaches. All right, fantastic. Q, looks like we have that piece of it worked out. Now, with the general discussion, let's go ahead and continue the general discussion on the topic at hand. Questions, comments, discussion, Mr. Clickenberry.
Just one on funding, you said there we had like 450 teams, so if you average, I don't know, maybe 10 people on a team, that's 4,500. So what are we, to fund this, are we looking at maybe entrance fees that are normally 10, you're gonna add maybe $1 that would cover this on a whole? I mean, is that pretty insignificant, I guess, to protect
If we,
kids?
that is a yes, but I mean, if we go with just the heads, you're talking about $7,000 annually. Will we look at adjusting league fees? Yeah, we'll look at it. I mean, it's probably something that needs to be looked at regardless if we were doing this or not, but to extend it on down to assistant coaches level, that would almost have to have been a certainty, we'd have to adjust fees. But this one's a little more doable, but we're still gonna look at it, I mean, 100%. Even with or without this, we always look at our league fees though, so. $7,000 on a youth athletic programs that usually generate somewhere around $160,000 annually, somewhere in there. So it's a decent percent.
But it wouldn't take I mean, it's not like you'd have to double the fees
No,
or
oh, no.
anything. We're
By no
talking 50 cents or $1 or
Yeah.
something, right? So, okay.
Yeah, and I do want to say, just full disclosure, there are some out there moving to coach pay options, but that is not an option for us. We struggle right now getting them anyway, so.
Yeah, no, you wouldn't want to deter it.
Yeah.
Additional questions, comments, discussion?
Are your assistant coaches always available
Available.
to be there to assist?
Well,
How does
I
that
mean,
work?
that's really dependent by the person. I mean, you want them to be. I mean, if you're a head coach, you want them to be, and you really need them if you can't be there for
Well, I
some reason.
understand the
Right.
head coach is
Right.
part of it, but it seems to me that if we're going to do this, the head coach would be sufficient. Because to me, the further down you carry it, the harder it's going to be to take care of all of it.
Sure. And we can, and Jim had this idea, and I love this idea, we can beef up our code of ethics to say, as a head coach, you are responsible for so-and-so of your assistant coaches. We can do that. And that language might even include, if you suspect wrongdoing, bring it to our attention, and we'll get it, we'll put them through a background check or whatever.
Any one of them could be good today and be a felon tomorrow,
And
so.
that's the same for a head coach. You're absolutely right.
Mr. Clickenberry, go ahead.
If you start doing too far down the list, it becomes to the point, and I haven't ever seen a staff member come around and observe our games, but that would, you get to a certain expense, you could just have another employee or two, like say at Miller Park during baseball season, that just monitors fields and moves around. And you may have that now, and I just haven't noticed them because I'm always on the field.
Out there game night, we have a full-time staff member out there 100% of the time. Not even a part-time, well.
Somebody, because there's other people at the gate. I've never had any. I usually wear my identification, and I haven't ever had anybody come up, and I haven't noticed them. That doesn't mean they're not there.
They are
I see them
there.
at the pool and other places. But.
And the referees also monitor activity from coaches and fans. So, Mr. Wilson, you have a question, sir?
I don't see holding the head coach responsible for the assistant coaches because
You can.
the head coach, in that case, would have to know everything there was to know about the guy, and that just doesn't happen.
Well, yes, two parts of that. As a head coach, you are ultimately responsible for even your fans and your assistant coaches on a sportsmanship other level. Maybe we're taking it too far with that, but you are responsible for everything that goes on with your team as a head coach, and because if we have an issue, we're coming right to the head coach. That's where we're coming to. So, I understand what you're saying. I don't really know how in a perfect world that would work, but they got to set for us some responsibility for the behavior of their assistant coaches.
Well, I can see that.
Right.
But to know whether they're a felon or a drunk or whatever, they don't always know that.
Well, one thing from my days of coaching Little League Baseball, I had an assistant coach, and if that person that I trusted couldn't make it, and I couldn't make it, cancel. I would never rely on anybody else. The part-time parents that would be at all the practices, they would say, I'll run the practice for you. Absolutely not. And that would, to me, would curtail the head coach from just saying, oh, go ahead and do the practice. It'll be okay. No, it's only going to be me or Jared, whatever the case may be. We're the only two that are going to be there running practices. So, I mean, I can see that point, but at the same time, you got to hold somebody ultimately accountable.
That's actually, do we require that? Because that's what we should have on our form. If your name is not on this form as a coach or assistant coach, then you can't run a practice or have a game at the city. I mean, that would be the way to fix that right there.
Are there agencies out there that require a cleared background cleared coach be at every practice? Yes. How in the world they police and monitor that, I have no idea.
No, I'm not talking about having them cleared. I'm
Right.
just saying they have to be on our list so that at least the head coach that is responsible, that we're holding responsible, has listed those people that he's deemed good enough to go and do that. If he's not going to put them on that list, we can't just have any old parent show up to run a coach or something if the head coach is going to be the one responsible for them. I mean, I guess that's their risk, but I wouldn't. I'm like Jim, there's no way I'd do that.
Mr. Wilson?
Well, the second part of what I was saying is that I think that you should run a background check on the head and the assistant. Might have been a roundabout way, but that's my thoughts.
Ms. Harrelson?
Generally, when you talk about co-coach, I mean, I know a lot of times that is, for the coaches, they do kind of consider that
Sure.
their assistant.
Right.
I've never had an issue either with, you know, if the coach or the assistant or whatever, co-coach couldn't be there, we just didn't have practice. I mean, that's just, you know, I don't know if anybody's been to the ballpark when they're having practices. There's a flood of parents. Parents of almost every kid are there, and if not, then another parent is responsible for that kid. It's not the coach, it's not the assistant. I don't think you're going to have a problem there. I think if we start doing assistants and we get into just, you know, we'll have to put an assistant down, I'm going to pick somebody, we're going to get into a whole lot of money. Not that that's everything, but that's a lot of money.
It is.
That's where you can just get in some increased staff. Instead of having one, you just have a
Well,
second one out at the fields would be cheaper.
Yeah, there's always staff out there. There's never, I've never seen just one. There's always been more than one. Yeah, and as far as the coach being responsible, that's already in our ethics.
It is.
It's already
For their
there.
fans, their assistant
Yeah.
coaches, for the players, to a level, I probably shouldn't have said to their background level. I mean, I understand
No,
that.
you
But they are
can't.
responsible for the team's behavior. They
Yeah,
are.
I mean, so if somebody's misbehaving and goofing off, you know, that is already, we already have that in our ethics policy, that the coach is responsible for removing that person.
Right.
You know, even removing a parent is being abusive.
Very true.
If they have
It
problems
happens.
at
It
one of the
happens.
fields, you can bet Jared's people will be there
Oh, yeah.
watching it extremely close.
Oh, yeah.
The last thing I do want to say is I don't anticipate this. The only area where I think it could be an issue in general, but the only area where I think it could be a real issue are from teams coming in from outside that all of a sudden we're saying you can't play here, and we're going to hold to it. We're going to hold to our policy, but whether that comes here one of these days or you guys get phone calls, I do think that could be an issue, and that is what it is. If we adopt a policy, we stick to it and we go with it.
So there are places too that. Additional questions, comments, discussion? It's good discussion tonight.
Thanks for your work, Jared. I know it was quite
Oh, you're welcome. Once again, I apologize. Should have made it happen sooner, but
No, and I agree with the gentleman that came up at the beginning of the meeting, too.
thanks, sir.
Anything at all, council? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no?
No.
No. Any abstentions? Motion carries 5-1. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Need a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Any abstentions? Motion carries. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.